Chris Mackowski for Emerging Civil War, and I'm pleased to be joined by Brian Baracz, a historian at Antietam National Battlefield. And Brian has been involved with understanding and interpreting the new map that has been discovered by S.G. Elliott. And Brian, when you saw this new map, what was your first impression?
Amazement, shock. It really something that we've hoped to see for a long time, that hoped that something like this was around, and to finally see it was really impressive, very impressive.
One of the things that made a huge impression on me when I first saw the map was just the sheer number of marks representing bodies. That made a huge impression on me.
Right. Yeah, I was the same way. Just to look at that, and we have at the Park Service just talking to the public and trying to put the number of casualties into perspective. How to do that, and having another tool like this is very helpful. And then to look at the map and to then realize that every slash you see on that is just a soldier killed, and so for each slash there are close to 3 others who are wounded in a field hospital in and around the Sharpsburg area. So just the enormity of the numbers on there is really striking, as you said.
Enormity, I think, is a fantastic word. Now, I know that you recently spent some time actually counting all of those marks. You want to talk about that process for me?
Yes, it certainly looked daunting. And then as I was studying a little section on the Sunken Road or a section over near the West Woods, you see that, but you see big blocks. But when you start trying to figure out, well, how many are there and how many are there? So I did some preliminary counts around the Sunken Road and came up with 700 in and around the road and the Piper Farm, and then up along the Hagerstown Turnpike, another 500. And then questions between the few of us that knew was, well, I wonder how many are on there. And we thought there was at least 3,000, but then to get that number and to confirm, and certainly somebody's going to do it. So had a kind of a rainy, cloudy day and figured, well, let's take a stab at it. And so we took the map and sectioned it off into 24 sections to help counting easier. And then just as I counted each individual grave, just kind of marked them off and used Photoshop, so you're able to kind of brush over the ones that we did. And it took a while, but between Union, Confederates, total, there's even horses listed on the map. So it was really very eye-opening. And when we came up with a final, what we think is a pretty good number, over 5,800, didn't think there would be that many on the map, but it certainly ties into our interpretation, where on the day of the battle, we say there were about 4,000 to 5,000 killed outright. And then those that would die maybe the next day or week or month in field hospitals, the number pushes close to 7,000. So it fits into what we've been saying. So that's one of the interesting things about the map, that sometimes we found that our information is kind of backed up by what we've seen on the map, and in other instances it's raised new questions. So, and that being said, it goes even going further. We know what we have in our national cemetery at Antietam that was taken from the field, which is around 3,200, and we have a number that's up at Rose Hill Cemetery in Hagerstown, which is over 3,000 Confederates. And so like I said, all the numbers start to add up. And we know a majority of the soldiers have been removed from the Antietam National Battlefield, and every once in a while we'll find remains here or there, but majority have been removed, and the numbers kind of work out to prove that for us.
Now, I understand your wife deserves a little credit for helping you with that count.
She helped with the counting and setting up the spreadsheet. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Good project.
Now, as you explain your process here, that seems to me to be like a very intimate way to deal with the map as a resource, and a very intimate way to deal with those numbers. As a historian, what kind of impression did that kind of intimate work make on you?
Right. I always think at Antietam, for me, it kind of boils down to that individual soldier in their story. And so to see each little mark on there, and in many, well, I shouldn't say many, there's also a map similar to this for Gettysburg. And from what I've learned from Tim and Andrew up there and Gary, is that there are more names listed or identified on the Antietam map than the Gettysburg map. There were 50 names. So then to kind of have these pieces and the names, and one fella on the map is identified as being in the 1st Maryland U.S., which was not in Antietam, and it with just a little bit of poking around and where the position on the map and regiments that were there, it was certainly the 1st Minnesota. And so when you start backing in and looking into the story a little bit more, and you come across the story in the local newspaper of this guy, his friends wrote that we buried him in this beautiful grove of trees not far from the battlefield, and to see that single grave in the West Woods in a grove of trees not far from where they fought on the battlefield, I mean, it really, really ties that together. Or the grave of John Marshall right out behind where the current day visitor center is. William Frazanito kind of discovered that location, but now this map has John Marshall, his grave marked on the map right behind the visitor center. So those that have been identified are, I mean, they're all kind of personal in their own way, just a little slash or plus sign, but then the names even just add so much more. So.
Now, I know that a number of units are also marked on the map. Were there any things about that either confirmed or challenged what typical interpretation is about where units were in the field?
I'm thinking I don't know so much as where they were, but there were some, what I think are maybe regiments that were misidentified or groups of graves that were misidentified. Again, going over to the West Woods, there was the 42nd New York is identified on the map. And in the 2 rows of 42nd New York soldiers, there are about 95 graves. Well, the 42nd New York only lost 41 killed, but in that same spot, in the same location, was the 15th Massachusetts, where these graves are located, right where they fought, and they incurred the most casualties for a Union regiment at Antietam, and they lost 114 killed. So it's very possible that grave location should be marked 15th Massachusetts instead of 42nd New York, because there's only 4 other graves on the map listed as 15th Massachusetts. And certainly they were not all taken home, which we know many from Pennsylvania and the closer states, soldiers were removed back to home cemeteries. But that, or like I said, the case of the 1st Maryland, which is actually the first Minnesota. Another section that's interesting is by the Sunken Road in 1988. Remains from soldiers that our archaeologists said were from the Irish Brigade because of specific artifacts found in the graves, ammunition, buttons, crucifixes, rosary beads. Where those guys were found on the map, it shows 63rd Irish Brigade in that very essentially the same location. So some things confirmed, and like I said, other questions have been raised.
So the park has put together a website that talks about the map, and we'll share a copy of that link. What else does the park plan to do using this resource moving forward?
We're in the middle now of redesigning our museum exhibits, and this will certainly be featured in the new exhibits. Also, just everyday interpretation, folks that come out to the battlefield to help put that number, as we spoke about earlier, put that number into perspective for people. But it will certainly be featured in our new exhibits.
Very good. Now, I know you've got a big day coming up with the announcement this afternoon, but before I let you go, is there anything else you want to add that I haven't touched on?
No, I think that's just about it. We're just all very excited about it. It's so the information that it's going to provide us and being able to help talk to the public better is what's more important. And also in some cases, put a name to a place or raises more questions. It's just very good. Very, very powerful, very powerful. So that's good for us.
Very good. Always exciting to have a big discovery like this. And I want to thank you for the work that you have done to help unpack this and make this accessible and help people understand really the potential that this holds for us. So thank you so much for that, Brian.
Sure. No problem.
So Brian Baracz, historian at Antietam National Battlefield, thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Chris Mackowski. Thank you for joining us here at Emerging Civil War.